Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. Maraya Brown here with the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. After 144 episodes, it sure felt like I needed to do some past episodes due justice. So I am recording this intro from Park City, Utah. I'm here at a beautiful mastermind, and the podcast team said, we need it now. And here's what I want you to know is over the rest of 2024, I am thrilled to bring back some of the past episodes that are just well worth your time and energy to listen to. Maybe you've listened before, maybe you haven't, but to bring back guest experts that brought tremendous value, as well as some of the top listened to episodes around women's hormones, libido, well-being, speaking to the ambitious individuals out in the world that really want to have legacy. So, love to have you here at the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. Stay in the space, enjoy the remainder of 2024 so that you can really make the most of some of the past 144 episodes. And then, of course, coming back in 2025, we will be bringing back some amazing new episodes and interviews that I'm doing now. You'll be blown away by the content. Please offer a review. Please follow, and cheers to your absolute sense of deep foundational vibrancy and well-being. Maraya Brown here with the Women's Vibrancy Code. Welcome back to this fun, juicy series where I'm going through each of the seasons of a 28-day cycle within a woman's life experience. The chapters hormonally, the chapters throughout our menstrual cycle, our moon cycle. Today, I want to talk about the time when we are bleeding. If you're not bleeding, I consider it your winter time. Or if you'd like to look at it with the moon, it's either going to be the full moon or the new moon. And as you track, you're going to become a little bit more clear on how to know when you're in this specific chapter if you don't bleed. If you do bleed, this is simple. Let's talk about the time when you're bleeding. So on average, we call day one. So not on average. We call day one of your menstrual cycle the first day that you bleed. Okay. This is when all the hormones are low. Most healthy, vibrant, spectacular women are going to bleed about 3 to 4 days. Okay. Couple days of heavy, couple days of light. We should be good to go. My preference is that if you're a bleeding woman, you use a menstrual cup. That's a whole nother conversation. And this is the time that I think of as winter. Okay. It's the time, like I said, for us to rest. What are some of the symptoms that you might take note of as you fill out the menstrual tracker? And hopefully you've downloaded the menstrual tracker. Look in the show notes. Go to my Instagram profile, into the link in the bio, and grab the menstrual tracker. For overall health, we often feel okay, a little bit blah, a little bit tired, a little bit down. For many women, it's a little bit harder to feel positive or grateful. We just want a little bit of alone time, okay? Our hope for the future is deeply introspective. We're in our place of vision. We're in our space of intuition. And sometimes that can feel really heavy. And depending on how potent the moon is that month,
or whatever has gone on in your life and how well you honored the seasons of your infradian rhythm for the weeks leading up, that can really impact your hope for the future. Your energy level in general will be a little bit more low. This is not the time to do big exercise. This is the time to honor some rest, okay? Libido can vary. For some women, they don't particularly want to have sex or be touched during this time, especially if they're struggling with menstrual cramps. Although, if you are someone who struggles with menstrual cramps, sometimes a great orgasm can be that thing to create the spasm in the muscle and then help the muscle relax, i.e., your uterine muscle, your cervical muscle. And depending on what type of partnership you're in, if you're comfortable making love during your bleeding time, there are plenty of women that still have a nice, strong libido. Obviously, there's some religious pieces, Orthodox Jewish, Ramadan. There's no touching during that time, and we all get to honor whatever way we choose to be. Also, during libido, during that time, because we're more introspective, likely we're going to want more tender touch, a nice massage. Okay, so if the men out there that are listening to this, if you're trying to figure out how do I better support my female partner when she's in her bleeding time, this is a really nice time to give her a massage, her low back, her shoulders, her feet. If you can find some magnesium that you're going to rub onto her body, make her a hot bath, cook her a nice, hot, nourishing meal, go get her some flowers. This is the time where a woman really wants to feel cared for and nourished as she's caring for and nourishing herself. This is the time that meditation is important. Reading those books that are introspective, writing the journal is really potent during this time, okay? Thrilled for projects, not necessarily for doing the projects, but this is definitely a time where we want to listen to what ideas come. Okay, I went to a breathwork session this last bleeding time on my first day of bleeding, and wow, afterwards, there were some women that wanted to talk to me, and afterwards I felt kind of bad. I was downright rude, I think. I just didn't even want to talk. I wanted to journal out all the downloads that came. I mean, there was so much vision. There was so much intuition about myself, my future, my family, my career, my business, my clients. It was like, whoa, these are all amazing downloads. Now, it's not necessarily the time to act on those downloads, but feeling thrilled for projects, it's feeling thrilled to quietly, in our alone time, brainstorm the projects. Anxiety, it really depends on the woman. For some women, they do have some anxiety during this time because our hormones are at a low, especially if you are pushing yourself too hard, expecting yourself to continue to perform at work, perform in the bedroom, perform in the household, perform in your community, just grin and bear it, take some ibuprofen for the cramps. That can lead to an anxiety that is like a deep soul anxiety. Irritability. Once again, irritability is not going to be the viper necessarily. We're tender, and often in that winter time, it's quiet. So we don't necessarily have the energy to fight hard, but we do sometimes have that irritability. Remember, this is winter. This is the time where the snow is on the ground. Nature is quiet. The leaves have fallen. Animals are hibernating. When we don't honor that, we will feel irritable. We will feel irritable with ourselves. We will feel irritable with those around us. Sadness, yes, sadness can show up during this time. For some, it is harder to find the feelings of gratitude. Instead, we have a melancholic depth to us during this winter time, right? Desire to socialize? No. Most women who really honor their winter time, if it's socializing with one person in a really long, lengthy, deep, connected conversation, right? Regarding healthy cravings, it is important to listen to what you crave during that time. And often we need ample protein. We need ample quality fat, right? Your avocado oil, your coconut oil, your MCT oil, your nuts, your seeds, your sprouts, lots of produce, okay? But more than anything is hydrating becomes more important during this time, and eating iron-rich foods, especially if you bleed a whole lot. If you're someone who does intermittent fasting, yes, you are welcome to fast. I've even had a client who struggles with endometriosis and really heavy periods, and she's done a 72-hour fast during her bleeding time to fully get into that autophagy state and allow the ketosis to tell the cells to really clean up, and her cramps go away, which is fascinating. Beauty, self-care, often during our bleeding time, we want to wear our sweatpants, right? We're not necessarily excited to get all dressed up in our fancy clothes and our fancy makeup and our fancy blah, 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 and go out and socialize. So give yourself some grace. Sleep in a little bit. Can you stay in your PJs for the day? If you work on Zoom, can you keep your video off? Can you wear your pajama bottom? Take your undies off, right? Beauty care and self-care definitely shifts during the winter time. It's much more soothing and soft and slow. Feelings of creativity, it's an internal creativity. This is the time to journal. This is the time to craft and draw, but not necessarily in a big group dynamic. That's more for your springtime. Feeling the love is very different during our winter time. Feeling the love during our winter time is nourishing, deeply connected, and it's really tapping into the self-love, right? Headaches, some women have headaches, but more often than not, if they're hormonal headaches, they're going to show up during your fall time. Some women do end up with headaches when they're bleeding, and they can be menstrual migraines that aren't so fun. And so just take note as you use the tracker to take note of when are the headaches showing up. Do I want you to curb the headaches with ibuprofen? My preference is no. It can lead to leaky gut, right? It can kind of do a number on our gut lining. I would much prefer that we address the cause of the headaches, particularly if they're hormonal, and we find other solutions for those headaches. Muscle aches and pains, yes. Muscle aches and pains tend to be the strongest during fall time and winter time. So the last week of your menstrual cycle and the first, say, 5 days of your menstrual cycle, but they're different. So during bleeding time, it's just a little bit more tender. Obviously, if there's menstrual cramps, you can play around with hot and cold contrast. You can play around with intermittent fasting. You can play around with motherwort, arnica, heat, right? There's a lot of things that can sometimes really make a difference if it's menstrual cramps, and obviously addressing if you are bleeding really heavy during this time, we have to address that there's likely estrogen dominance, meaning in your follicular phase, which is springtime, so to speak, your body's likely producing excess estrogen. And then during your fall time, where progesterone is supposed to kick in, your body's likely not producing enough progesterone to balance out that estrogen. And so now there's heavy bleeding, crampy bleeding. And so we can address that. Same with fibroids. Fibroids tend to, I think, of estrogen dominance. Joint aches and pains, that can definitely take place during the moon time, the bleeding time, the winter time. Give yourself some grace, add in some extra magnesium, have your arnica ready for you. Make sure that you're not overdoing it with your exercise. This is a time to be gentle. If you have a personal trainer, I say have the conversation and say, I'm bleeding. I need to be more gentle. No inversions, right? No power yoga. We get to give ourselves some grace. And today's episode is brought to you by Maraya Brown and our very own The Women's Vibrancy Code for ambitious individuals who want to create impact, legacy, and vibrancy without burnout. If you want to feel more energized, get to the root cause of your brain fog, hormonal challenges, and lack of sleep while turning up your passion, check out the Women's Vibrancy Code. Link is in the description. And I also have a couple free giveaways. So grab my free adaptogen elixir recipes and menstrual tracker by visiting me over on Instagram at _Maraya Brown _. That's MARAYA Brown. And put an underscore before and after the name over on Instagram. Click on the link in my bio and you are welcome to grab both of those free resources. Drink the adaptogen elixirs each and every day. Track your cycle, not just your menses, for about 3 months or more, and watch how much more spectacular you feel when your body is better adapting to stress and you're honoring your dynamic, rhythmic nature. These 2 resources used to be exclusively for program participants, and now I am happy to say that I offer them as free downloads. So go over to Instagram, grab them. You're welcome to reach out to me at any point. Can't wait to hear how you're enjoying them, how you like the flavors, and what big takeaways you're experiencing by tracking not just your menses, but all of the dynamic things that change each and every month. With that, ta-ta for now. Regarding feeling sexy, it's a very different sexy. It's not the seductress. It's not the passionate, sensual, ovulatory sexy. It's a much more like deep, motherly, soft, voluptuous, tender, connected, loving sexy. And so just take note for yourself as you track what really shows up for you. Regarding discharge, often there's no discharge necessarily as we're bleeding. It's blood that's coming out of our womb instead. And then as we go into springtime, there's a bit more white discharge. It's scant initially and then grows and grows. Once we go into ovulatory time, it's copious, tends to be more clear like egg white, and then it tends to dry up, become more thick and white as we go into the progesterone dominant time. Amount of discharge, I just mentioned that, amount of blood. Breast tenderness, that's a really fascinating thing. Breast tenderness, remember, estrogen is proliferative. It's going to grow breast tissue. So for some women, they notice breast tenderness as the estrogen is building during springtime or our follicular phase, the estrogen dominated time. But more often than not, most of the breast tenderness tends to be during the fall time as the hormones start to drop and as the progesterone is high. And for you, just take note. And obviously, as you are in a sexual relationship, either with yourself or with someone else, the more we can have this conversation with our partner to let them know if this is a time where your breasts are more tender or your muscles are more achy or you don't feel as flexible, that's really important for you to know and your sexual partner to know so that adjustments can be made based on where you are. Once again, don't judge it. This is physiologic. This is biologic. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to change it. We simply get to be women, dynamic, ever-changing beings. Regarding excitement for work, that tends to really show up the most during springtime and summertime. When we're in our winter time, it's once again creative brainstorming in quiet, right? If you imagine bundled up in a snowsuit out in the snow, looking at the mountaintops and feeling really inspired, really visionary, and excited about work from the perspective of what do I want to create in the long term? I'm going to write a book. What do I want the book to be about? I'm going to do a TED Talk. What do I want to talk about? I want to parent differently. How do I want to show up as a mother? I want to show up. I want my relationship to feel different. What would it look like for us to have dates? And how would I want to feel on those dates? And how would I like to really feel heard and seen and nourished? So it's more of that kind of excitement. AM temp is going to be the same. If you take your temp every morning before you get out of bed, the time it's going to spike is when you're ovulating. Ability to fall asleep. This can definitely be impacted during fall time and winter time. If we're talking for this episode specifically about winter, what do I want to say about that? Because your hormones are low, you can sometimes have a hard time falling asleep and staying asleep. If you are someone who is on bioidentical progesterone, this is a lovely time to make sure you're taking your progesterone and you're doing it at night before you go to bed to help yourself sleep. this is definitely the time to add in your adaptogens and make sure you're drinking your nourishing, hot, spice-filled adaptogen elixirs every single day, because quality of sleep can be impacted. Gassiness and bloating, that tends to be most pronounced during the fall week, but in winter time, yes. Depends on the individual. Often what I hear for women is once they start to bleed, their bowels release and clean out. Once again, if you are not a woman that bleeds, pay attention. Start taking note of if your gassiness and bloating have a cyclical nature to them, and pay attention to when they're pronounced and where the moon is, and track it for a good 3 months and then take note. So diarrhea and constipation, I talked about that. Weight, yes, weight will tend to go up a little bit when we're in our bleeding time, as well as when our fall time. So if you would like, when you're in your winter time, like I said, doing an extended intermittent fast might be something that really fuels you, feeds you, nourishes you. And now we're not having as much of the weight gain and bloating, right? And the body can be resilient to a longer extended fast between that, say, day 1 to day 10 of a 28-day infradian rhythm. Regarding foods, during our winter time, like I said, we want to eat really nourishing foods. We want to hydrate well. Iron-rich foods would be your raisins, your prunes, your dark leafy greens, red meat, black beans, kidney beans, clams, cooking with a cast iron skillet, seaweed. If you're someone who needs to supplement with additional iron, please don't take like a prescription of ferrous sulfate. My favorite is Floridex in liquid form. Keep in mind that vitamin C helps the absorption of that iron. So when we get it from food sources, the body knows what to do with it. If you're going to add in extra supplements during your winter time, it's going to be the supplements that feel nourishing. From an adaptogenic standpoint, your ashwagandha and your shatavari, okay? For some women, they tend to have like almost flu-like symptoms when they're bleeding. So if that's you and you tend to be achy and feel run down and your immune system feels a little bit weak, some extra reishi, some extra chaga. And like I said, really making sure that when you're eating, you're getting ample protein, quality fats, and lots of plants. For some women, they really prefer for those plants to be cooked or steamed during bleeding time. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're in your bleeding time, your cervix is often going to be a little bit lower and it will change positions. So when it comes to your sex life, if you are someone who makes love or has any type of penetration when you're in your bleeding time, take note of that. Positions are going to shift. The comfort of penetration will change because your cervix will be in a different place. And I think that's good for now. Hopefully you're enjoying this series. And next, I'll move on to the springtime, your follicular phase, that estrogen dominant phase of your 28-day cycle.